So glad to see you all turn out today. I'm happy to see the religious, the married couples. I'd heard of one married couple that was kind of having some problems, and they went to counseling, and the wife started off, and she said to the counselor, she said, my husband, he's not affectionate to me anymore. He doesn't take me on dates anymore. He forgets to do the things I ask him to do around the house. And now the husband just rolled his eyes. Now, the counselor got a feel for what was going on. So he got up from behind his desk. He walked over to where the wife was, and he took up the wife in his arms, and he gave her a long, passionate kiss. And then he sat her down and went back to his desk. And then he said to the husband, now, this is what your wife needs about 3 times a week. And the husband said, oh, okay, I can bring her here on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. So it's a little misunderstanding we have here with intimacy. And I think you'll be the first to agree with me that many people in the modern culture have a lot of misunderstandings with intimacy, especially young people, teenagers. They think they know what the church has to say about sex, but they really don't. Speaking at a high school in America, as a Catholic high school, 800 students. And before I spoke, a doctor got up and he addressed them. And he said, I'm going to do a little quiz with you to measure your understanding of sexuality and things. So I'm going to give you a quote, and you tell me who said the quote, and if you know it. And so he starts by saying some words from a rap song, some really raunchy lyrics. And all of the students yell the name of the rapper, and they start singing the song with him. And he's like, okay, I can tell you're familiar with that. And then he does a couple more rap songs, and all of the students start singing these dirty rap songs with him. And I'm like, well, this is a strange approach for a chastity talk. And then he said, but okay, I got one more quote. You tell me who said it. A man shall leave his father and his mother, cleave to his wife, and the two of them shall become one flesh. Who said it? A hushed silence fell over 800 Catholic high school students. One of the students said, I know, Buddha. And the guy's like, no, it's not Buddha. Another student said, no, it's Muhammad Ali, who he thought was a great religious leader, not the boxer from the 1970s. And then another kid said, no, I think it's God. And then one of their kids said Jesus, I guess one of their honors students. But it just shows that they really thought they knew what the church had to say about sex. But when you really press them on it, young people as well as young married couples today, they really think the church's teachings on sex boils down to just a big negative, a big no. I saw this on a greeting card in America. It had 3 nuns on the front, and it said, on your birthday, remember our motto, if it feels good, don't do it. Now, I think this is what a lot of people think the church has to say about sex. Well, if it feels good, it's probably immoral. And what we need to do is challenge this misconception that the church is down on sex. And we've got science to back us up. Research has shown that married couples who pray together regularly report 90% higher levels of sexual satisfaction in marriage. Couples who pray together in marriage are twice as likely to describe their marriages as being highly romantic. And this begins to come out in the media reports. A newspaper called USA Today had an article called Aha, call it the revenge of the church ladies. There was a skit on Saturday Night Live called The Church Lady, and you may have seen it, I don't know, I hope not. But in it, there's this uptight, prudish lady. And here's what it said. Sigmund Freud said that church ladies suffer from an obsessional neurosis with guilt, suppressed emotions, repressed sexuality. Saturday Night Live satirized them as uptight prudes who think sex is downright dirty. But several major research studies show that women who go to church and the men who sleep with them are the most sexually satisfied people on the face of the earth. Now, isn't that special? And it goes on. This is another report that came out. This is USA Reuters news service. Hormones in semen shown to make women feel good. Hormones in semen may help to ease female depression because women whose partners don't use condoms are less likely to feel down. Scientists at the State University of New York suspect the mood-altering hormones are absorbed through the vagina and make women feel good, but they stress that the results are not an excuse for unprotected sex, heaven forbid. The magazine said the results are not a big surprise because scientists know that semen contains several mood-altering hormones, including testosterone. Some of these have been detected in a woman's blood within hours of exposure to semen. To me, these are clues that God knew what he was doing in creating the one flesh union of a man and a woman. And when we use the contraceptives, you think we flip fertility on and off like a light switch, we're the ones who end up harming ourselves. And so I think God has this natural plan. He's the one who invented our sexuality, so we need to get back to that original purpose. So the question is, what is the purpose and meaning of sex? The purpose is for babies and bonding. The meaning of our sexuality, an easy way to understand it, is the wedding vows made flesh. So when you speak, perhaps in your ministries, to young married couples or even to singles, I often find this is one of the best ways to get them to understand the meaning of sex. That when my wife and I stood at the altar of our church in California and we professed our vows as husband and wife, they say, do you come here freely? Yes, I'm not paying her, I'm not manipulating her, she's freely marrying me. It's a total gift of self, it's gonna be faithful, it's gonna be open to life. And you make these promises and vows that your marriage is free, total, faithful, and open to life. And then you leave the church and you enter the sanctuary of your bedroom, and with your bodies, you exchange the wedding vows through your body. I give my body to you freely. I'm not manipulating you, I'm not pressuring you. It's a free gift of self. Not just freely received, it's freely given. I have self-control, so I can make a gift of myself. Freely given, total. I hold back nothing from you, not even my fatherhood. It is a faithful gift to you, and not just with my body, but with my imagination. And it is a total, is a fruitful gift, a life-giving gift. And so the wedding vows are made flesh, so that each time a husband and wife become one flesh, they renew their marriage covenant. Now the problem is that our world takes the wedding vows and inverts them all, where today sex is not free. It's paid for in prostitution, it's pressured in sexual abuse, it's not total, it's hooking up and friends with benefits. It's not faithful, it's the cheaters and desperate housewives and rampant infidelity. And then it's not fruitful, it's deliberately sterilized. There's a fear of pregnancy. I asked a bunch of high school boys once, what is the #1 sexually transmitted disease? And they said, oh, I know, pregnancy. And I'm like, no, children are not bacteria. But there's this fear where we've inverted. And what happens is when you take the wedding vows and you invert them, nobody's satisfied because it's the inversion of love. And then what happens is we have these magazines like Cosmopolitan magazine offering women hundreds of new sexual ideas and techniques. It's almost as if we're trying to make up with technique what they're lacking in substance. But you're trying to find all these techniques, but a philosopher from America, Peter Kraft with Boston College, he said, you don't really buy a book on plumbing until the pipes are broken. And in the same respect, you don't have this cultural obsession with sexual techniques until you've lost the very healthy substance of human sexuality. But if we can get back to God's original plan, which is the wedding vows made flesh, then when a man and a woman love each other as they ought, they make visible the love of God. Because throughout the scriptures, God uses sexual intimacy as a metaphor for divine love. And this isn't just found in the writings of Paul. This is throughout the Old Testament of God espousing Israel to himself when Israel worships other gods, accusing her of adultery and an unfaithful relationship. The Song of Songs in the Old Testament is erotic love poetry in the middle of the Bible. St. Thomas Aquinas, on his deathbed, asked his monks to bring him the Song of Songs and read it to him as he was about to enter heaven, because there's this metaphor of the total consummation of love between lovers, God and the soul. And so we've kind of lost this idea that God is the one who has wrought this deeper meaning into our sexuality. And then Paul reiterates this in Ephesians, where he said that a man shall leave his father and mother, cleave to the wife, the two will be one flesh, and this is a great mystery with Christ and the church. It's one of these statements that if it were not in the Bible, it would be hard to believe that it could have been there. That the authors of Scripture saying that the sexual act is a great mystery with Christ and the church. But if we study the life of Christ, this isn't a big surprise. Christ's whole public ministry was a marriage proposal to us. And to the apostles, this wasn't a big surprise because they knew the traditions of a Jewish wedding. When a Jewish man would propose to a Jewish woman in ancient times, he would typically do it over a glass of wine. And if she drank the wine, it was a sign that she would enter into this covenant with her betrothed. It would often take place under a chuppah, which is a bit of a canopy, similar to today's baldaquinos in Catholic churches over the altar. And if she were to sip the wine, it would be a sign that they'd enter into this marriage covenant together, and then he would leave her. But before he leave her, he would often leave gifts with her as a sign of his love and fidelity. Similar as Christ, before leaving the church on the crucifixion, left us the gift of the Holy Spirit, left us the gift of the Eucharist. And the betrothed would leave her with these gifts, and then he would say to her, I'm going to prepare a place for you at my Father's house. And when I come back, I'm going to have this place for you. And so he would leave. Obviously, you hear the echo of the words of Christ. I'm going to prepare a place for you. And where this man would prepare the place for his beloved would be at the residence of his father. And he would work there and labor to prepare a place worthy of her. But he couldn't say when it was ready. It was up to the Jewish father to determine when the dwelling place was suitable for the bride to be brought in. So he didn't specifically know the wedding day. In fact, Jewish tradition says that if you were to ask an engaged Jewish man when his wedding day was, he would have to reply, I do not know. Only the Father knows the day of the wedding. Again, reminiscent of the words of Christ. And during this time, the bride would be preparing herself in purity, preparing her white wedding gown for this special day. As we read in the book of Revelation, the church must do through her good works and faithfulness. And the groom would have a best man who would announce his coming. And they would blow a shofar, which is the horn, I believe, of a ram. And he could come at any point. He could come in the middle of the night, and the bride needed to be ready. So she and her bridesmaids would have oil with their lamps by their bedside, so that when the best man announced the groom is here, they could get up and go to the wedding feast at any point they were prepared. And you hear this. Imagine being a Jew and knowing all of this, and then hearing the teachings of Christ. You would understand this marital metaphor that he's placing before us. And then ultimately, the consummation of the marriage was a 7-day feast, at least a week worth of marital celebration taking place, which is a foreshadowing of the perfection of heaven, of this consummation of love between God and the soul. And this, when it comes to human sexuality, is not imposing theology on sex. I mean, St. Augustine of Hippo called the cross the marriage bed of Christ, where he gave his body to his bride, the church, us, that we might have life within us, just as a husband gives his body to his bride, that she might bear his life within her. And if we can get back to this original plan for life-giving love, free, total, faithful, fruitful, and the theology that John Paul II has reminded us of in the theology of the body, then we can use this free, total, faithful, fruitful as kind of a measuring stick for the morality of sexual acts. Well, why is homosexuality wrong? Well, you can measure it. Is it a total gift of self? The bodies can't give themselves. Is it life-giving? No, it's impossible. And so what about masturbation? What about this? What about that? That John Paul II's theology of the body, when properly understood, to me provides a bit of a cultural antidote to explain all of our contemporary moral problems that we're facing in an adequate way. And I love the writings of the Holy Father because he doesn't argue so much from the outside in as from the inside out. What is it the human heart longs for? What is your human experience? And have you found the love that which you yearn for? And so the writings that he's given us, I think, are brilliant. Now, one of the most common problems we have today is contraception. Now, how does what he's given to us answer the problems of contraception? Because you know the promise of contraception has always been, well, look, it's going to decrease HIV in your country. It's going to solve poverty. You know, it's affordable. It's responsible. It's safe. It's scientific. It's modern. It's practical. Like as a panacea for all our modern problems. I was recently in the Philippines, and the government there is trying to push a reproductive health bill through where it's going to normalize abortion and contraception. And they're telling the people these lies. Well, it'll eradicate disease. It'll solve poverty. And I spoke to them and I said, look, the solution of poverty is not to reduce the number of innocent poor children. The solution to poverty is to reduce the number of rich, corrupt politicians. You know, that's the root of poverty in any given country. And, and the people cheered because they know the wealth of the poor is their family. That's their wealth. In fact, who's going to care for the poor when they become old but their children? You rob them of that, you rob them of their very heritage. And so this concept, oh, it's safe, it's scientific, it's modern, oh, but NFP. Oh, you mean the rhythm method? Oh, that calendar outdated thing? Oh, yeah, try that, you'll be pregnant in 5 minutes. That's what we all hear from our doctors and our gynecologists. The rhythm method, that doesn't work. It's outdated. And this carries on to the mentality of the young people. They have no idea entering into marriage what NFP truly is. This is the case in California. In fact, when I speak to engaged couples in San Diego, the diocese has them fill out these surveys before the talk to kind of measure what they know about what the church says. And this one was filled out by a 26-year-old female before her wedding. And the first question was, in one sentence, define natural family planning. She said, that's a way to have sex that meets church requirements. Now, doesn't that sound like fun? And another woman, another survey said that's a way to have sex or a way of family planning that's very old-fashioned. But if you want something that's old-fashioned to plan your family, by all means, contracept. That's old-fashioned. Contraception's been around for about 4,000 years, at least in history. We've got Egyptian papyrus from 1850 talking about various forms of contraceptives, including inserting crocodile dung into the woman's body. I read a historian who speculated that a reason that they might have used crocodile dung at the time is he believed that there was a crocodile god who would be invoked if you needed to terminate a pregnancy. And they would wear an amulet of a crocodile god around the uterus as an amulet to ward off pregnancy or cause an induced abortion. And he says, my speculation is that that's why they would have used the dung of a crocodile, inserting it into a woman, and then medically it would work as a barrier method and perhaps even as a spermicide to prevent pregnancy. Now, as the ages went on, even at the time of Christ, contraception was rather common. We have the ancient writings of a man named Cyrannus of Ephesus, who was an ancient gynecologist in Rome, and we have his recipes for over 40 spermicidal concoctions that could be created by mixing various fruits and nuts and inserted into a woman's body. Now, at the same time, the Christians were firmly opposed to contraception. This is not something invented in the 1960s. All the early Christians were opposed. All of the early church fathers spoke unanimously against it. Now, as the centuries drew on, in the Middle Ages, they began a little bit more superstitious. Women would wear around their neck amulets to ward off pregnancy. These amulets would contain things like the liver of a cat or the earwax of a mule, and she would wear this around her neck. Personally, I think it would be a good contraceptive because I don't know what guy wants to get close to a girl with, mule earwax around her, but, whatever works. At the same time, they were experimenting with oral contraceptives. And they'd been doing this for centuries before, but in the Middle Ages, they introduced oral contraceptives that included lead, mercury, arsenic, and strychnine. Now, obviously, these worked real well because they killed mom, so she's not going to get pregnant. And they realized, well, maybe that's not the best thing. So in the Middle Ages, went on, and then you have the Protestant Reformation. Calvin, Luther, Zwingli, everybody opposed to contraception. If you could read the writings of the Protestant reformers on contraception, they speak more forcefully against contraception than I have ever heard in a Catholic homily. Priest, bishop, or anybody. Much stronger even than Humana Vitae, and how strongly they're condemning it in the language that they're using of it's worse than sodomy, it's murder. I mean, they were so strongly against it, the Protestants. Now, as the years again drew on, in the early 1900s, they continued to experiment. In America in the 1900s, contraception was illegal. Contraception has been illegal in America for the greater part of our history. But what ended up happening in the 1960s, there was a woman born named Margaret Sanger, the founder of modern-day Planned Parenthood. Now, Margaret Sanger came from a Catholic family. Her father worked creating Catholic saints and angel statues. Her mother had 18 pregnancies, 11 children, and died at a relatively young age after the children. And apparently, as the legend goes, Margaret Sanger stood over her dead mother's body and said to her father, "This is your fault. She had too many children." And if we can understand, though, where she was coming from, it was a heart motivated, I think, for love of women, but how quickly it became twisted. She left the Catholic Church, started promoting abortion, women's rights, contraception, founding this American Birth Control League, trying to get birth control into the hands of women. The experimentation was continuing at this time. In the 1930s, if you were to open a women's magazine in America, you'd find ads suggesting women use Lysol as a contraceptive. That's a household cleaner for contraceptives. Athlete's foot medicine, they said you could actually use as a contraceptive. Insert that into the woman as well. And these things were going on while she was trying to push contraception. She was also meeting with the Ku Klux Klan at the time, because she was deeply into eugenics. She could not stand black people. She said they're an inferior race, and so we should just do our best to try to weed them out by distributing contraceptives to them, and abortion as well. And that's why today you'll find that the majority of Planned Parenthood clinics are in minority neighborhoods. Now, most people who work for them, I am sure, are not racist individuals, but they're still carrying out the intentions of the racist founder. And so this is what Margaret Sanger was up to. And in the 1930s as well, the 1920s, the Anglican Church said, we re-emphasize an emphatic reminder that contraception is wrong And then in 1930, they changed their mind at the Lambeth Conference in England, saying contraception is okay in serious circumstances for some married couples. After that, all of the Protestant denominations virtually followed suit, whereas the Catholic Church remained firm to her stance that contraception is gravely immoral. But it wasn't just the Catholic Church. Mohammed Gandhi said that contraception was wrong. He said that contraception, no matter how well-meaning its advocates may be, will still further degrade women. This is Mohammed Gandhi. Sigmund Freud said that contraception is perverse. I mean, you talk about the pot calling the kettle black. He knew it was perverse. I mean, he himself went on to have a vasectomy when he was, I believe, 67 years old. Not for family planning, because he thought it would bring him more vitality. Well, apparently it didn't work, but it was a fad at the time. And so you see, it wasn't just the church opposed to this. And so initially, when the Anglicans said it was okay, the Protestant churches jumped on the Anglican Church. Baptist, Methodist, Episcopalian, all of them condemned what the Anglicans had said, that it's okay. But eventually they all caved in on it. And then comes the 1950s and the invention of the birth control pill. Margaret Sanger, an ex-Catholic, met with Dr. John Rock, who is a Catholic doctor and a devout Catholic doctor who is trying to help women conceive. And in his studies, they met, and she talked about, well, let's create a pill for women that will, the church allows them to have sex during non-fertile times. Well, let's just create a pill that will extend their infertile time so that they can kind of have more intercourse without children. And Dr. John Rock thought, well, maybe the church will be behind this. And he invented this pill, and as he was creating it, they realized that the women who went on these hormones were not getting a period at all. And he said that no one's going to think this is natural. If the church is going to approve birth control, it'll have to be some kind of natural type of thing. So he said what we'll do is we'll give the woman a certain number of pills during the month that have synthetic hormones in that. And then we'll give them a bunch of pills that have nothing in them. Sugar, blank, placebo pills. And so during 3/4 of the month, you take the pills with hormones, and your body thinks you're pregnant because they're synthetic pregnancy hormones. So for the majority of the month, you think you're pregnant, and then all of a sudden your body goes off these pregnancy hormones. Your brain thinks you had a miscarriage. You bleed, you have what's called a withdrawal bleed. You're withdrawing from the pregnancy hormones, and then a week later, you think you're pregnant again. And this herking and jerking hormonally is how the birth control pill works in a woman's body. It also thins out the uterus, so if she does get pregnant, the baby can't attach in the womb, typically aborted about a week into the pregnancy. Her period will come, she won't know she just had a miscarriage. Women are not informed of this. Also in the 50s and 60s, there's more testing going on in third world countries. They weren't testing on Americans. Our government said it's illegal to test on our women. So the pharmaceutical companies said, well, then let's go to Puerto Rico, let's go to the Dominican Republic, let's go to Africa. I met a woman from Kenya in America. She said, I hate birth control. But she said, I remember as a little girl they came to my country, your American pharmaceutical companies, and they injected women with these drugs, telling them, well, if you take this, it'll help you not to have too many children, and it'll help you care for the ones you have, and we'll give you money too. And they'd offer them more money than they would make in a month anyway. And so they said, well, here you go. And then she said, the women in my village became sick. Many of them started to die. The leaders in our tribe thought that these women were cursed, so they sent them into the wilderness to die by themselves so they wouldn't infect the rest of us. And then we realized after enough women died that it was because they were using us as guinea pigs to test us, because if we die, we can't hire a high-powered attorney to sue your American pharmaceutical company. And so all the litigation costs of experimenting on American women aren't going to be incurred by testing on the poor. And this has continued to go on. It's going on now. They're testing anti-fertility vaccines on women in Africa, where they will inject a woman with a drug that will keep her, again, from ever having a child. And what they do is they take in a molecule of HCG, human chorionic gonadotrophin, is an early hormone that a newly conceived child emits. Now what they did is they took that little molecule of HCG and put in that molecule diphtheria and tetanus, the disease, and in a small enough dosage that it wouldn't infect the woman, but it would teach her immune system that HCG is associated with diphtheria and tetanus, so it should be attacked and killed. And so when the woman does get pregnant, the newly conceived embryo emits HCG, her immune system learns that that's like a disease, and she attacks the fetus and kills it. Her immune system attacks her own children. This testing is still going on. And so while this was happening, all these different tests, in 1968, the Catholic Church, Pope Paul VI, dropped the bomb of Humana Vitae on the church. And it was not received well amongst married couples, amongst clergy, amongst bishops. Many refused it. In fact, the Pope's own commission to study this matter recommended to him that you go on ahead and allow birth control in the Catholic Church. The Minority Commission, one person of whom was on that was John Paul the Great, Karol Wojtyła at the time, was recommending to Paul VI no. And you can see, if you know the writings of John Paul II, his thought interwoven throughout Humana Vitae. And so Paul VI announces this, and it didn't go well, but he made predictions in the 17th chapter of that little booklet. And he said, it is to be feared. He gives a list of predictions, and every one of them, if you haven't read Humana Vitae, go to it, read chapter 17. Everything this man predicted in the 1960s has completely come to fruition. He talked, about other things, about young people, you will see a gradual lowering of morality. You will have an increase in infidelity. Because if one reason people are moral is because they don't want to get pregnant, if you remove that consequence, more people think they can get away with it. More cheating, lowering morality of the young people. And he said it's also to be feared that the man, having grown used to contraceptive methods, will lose respect for the woman as his beloved companion, and this has truly happened. You look at history, these things have happened. And so he predicted all this. But I think what he couldn't have predicted was the side effects of birth control, as the scientists were promising us how safe it was. The birth control pill, when a woman takes the pill, her body experiences more than 150 biological changes when she goes on the birth control pill. That's according to a contraceptive textbook. From head to toe, the woman's body changes. Her eye changes. When a woman goes on a birth control pill, sometimes they complain that their contact lenses have become more uncomfortable. That is partly because of the cornea of the eye becomes steeper. It actually changes the shape of the eyeball, and it decreases the hydration. It makes it more dry. Her contact lenses are less comfortable, and women on the pill blink about 32% more often than women not on the pill. Sometimes I mention that at high schools, and the girls start looking around. She's on the pill. No, I'm not. Cut it out, guys. Stop it. But there's the biological changes. The breasts change. A woman on the birth control pill increases the risk of developing breast cancer. And this is not some theory. This is the World Health Organization admits this. The Mayo Clinic, the companies that make birth control, admit it increases the risk of breast cancer. In the 1950s, our original pills in the 60s had such a high level of estrogen, there was a lot of problems like blood clot, heart attack, stroke, breast cancer. And so the government said, you can't be putting that much estrogen into the pill. And the pharmaceutical company is like, well, great, we have millions of these pills and now we can't sell them? Well, organizations like UNAIDS, United Nations Organization for AIDS, said, well, I know what we can do with them, and they dumped them, meaning international agency to promote AIDS, wasn't what they do, but to prevent AIDS, said, we'll buy them for cheap, and we'll give them out in Africa. And so they ended up taking all of these pills that had the higher risk and then buying them cheap and then distributing them over here for family planning. Because they said, I know there's risks, but man, these poor people, they need this more than anything. I mean, we'll just have to deal with the consequences. And so you had the breast cancer, other side effects that we're seeing as a result of these things. If a woman becomes pregnant with a boy while she is on the pill, studies coming out now show that that boy is more likely to develop prostate cancer, because of the synthetic female sex hormones tinkering with the fetus's own hormones in the womb. More of these studies are coming out. And these aren't fringe right-wing websites. These are secular medical organizations, peer-reviewed scientific journals admitting these things. And then you've got other drugs. You've got the birth control shot. That company that makes the shot is being sued for $700 million because it'll thin the girl's bones out. In America, they have women that are about 20 years old with the bones of a 60-year-old woman in their body because they took Depo-Provera as a teenager for too long. In America, at least in California, if you're a child molester or a rapist, you can now be punished in the prison by Depo-Provera. They inject girls' birth control to rapists in America because it'll decrease their sex drive, but who they're not giving it to are dogs. Veterinarians actually refuse to give Depo to dogs. They said, that's not safe enough for house pets. but they'll give it to any girl at Planned Parenthood or Marie Stopes. And then they said, well, if you don't like the shot, we'll come up with other things. So they invented the birth control patch, which has killed dozens of women so far. The new one, they had something called Norplant, which is a series of rods inserted in the girl's arm. They got sued out of business, so now they have Implanon. It's one rod, they cut the girl's arm open, put it in, and it sinks hormones into her for years. And it says on the information that comes with it, call your doctor right away. If you start coughing up blood, you go completely blind or unconscious. It's like, how's she supposed to make the phone call? Like, where's my mobile phone? Yeah, but it's horrible. All these things. I spoke in England, and England, the church in England is a mess. The Catholic schools there are publicly funded, and the government says, well, we'll give you a nurse for your Catholic school so you don't have to pay for a nurse. And the Catholic school says, okay. The nurse slides right in there. Here, girls, here's your condoms, here's your pills, here's your patches. After my chastity talk, the girls came in, and they all had Implanon in their arms. And they're like, so that's why I've been having all these side effects? I'm like, well, yeah, I'm sorry they never told you any of this. They treated you like a dog who needed to be spayed instead of a woman made in the image and likeness of God. And so you have the side effects in the body of the woman. The side effects aren't just affecting the woman. You know who's getting hit hard now? The fish. No kidding. I don't know if you've seen this stuff, but water treatment plants, as they've been created, are not designed to be able to filter out synthetic sex hormones from the water system. So when women on the pill urinate, and there's 100 million women on the pill, it goes straight into the water system, straight through the sewage treatment plants, and downstream to the fish. And now what they're finding all around the world, especially in America, all the studies are coming out, you have transgender fish in America now. You've got gender-bending fish, male fish with ovaries, infertile male fish. And all this stuff is going on. And the environmentalists, we're told about this. Your fish are now having gender problems, and you're neutering your fish, and you're doing all this. You know, you're all green and pro-environment. You know, what do you have to say? And they basically have said, well, I think the fish need to take one for the team here, you know. And they basically just throw the fish under the bus because we can't live without birth control. That's just getting too personal. And so it's really interesting to see the ripple of change that's being impacted now, and not much is being done about it. And so often people say, you hear this phrase, well, sex is natural. You know, why can't I look at porn? Sex is natural. You know, why can't I sleep with my girlfriend? Sex is natural. You will notice the people who use this phrase, sex is natural, are the people least likely to have natural sex. They're having it with their laptop, with pornography. They're having it contraceptive with pills and barriers. This is not natural sexuality. We have to get back to God's natural plan, because if we do, we become the recipients of blessings, physical blessings. I had mentioned earlier how the woman's body can detect the man's hormones and it elevates her mood. They also found out if a woman and her partner are using the condom, the woman's body is deprived of physiological benefits from a man's semen. Now, what happened, this is out of the Journal of the American Medical Association, they found out that if a couple is using a barrier method of birth control, like a cap, a diaphragm, a condom, when the woman conceives the child and is in pregnancy, she's more than twice as likely to suffer from preeclampsia, which is an elevated blood pressure risk in the expectant mother. And it's a dangerous condition. And you're more than twice as likely to get it if you would use the condom. Now, why? Well, they found out when, we all know from biology that one sperm impregnates a woman. Well, what's the purpose of the other hundreds of millions? They used to think that they served no purpose but to increase the odds of fertility. They found it's not the case. A massive quantity of seminal fluids, plasma, prostaglandins are actually absorbed into the woman's uterus. When the sperm is on the cervix of the woman, the entrance to the womb, her immune system will send lymphocytes, or white blood cells, down to the cervix, and they will actually take sperm proteins, sperm DNA, chemicals into the woman's body in her lymph nodes, where her immune system will learn to recognize the genetic type of that man's sperm. She develops what's called a gradual tolerance to the antigens on the male's semen. She learns that type of semen. And so if she switches partners and gets pregnant, she's more likely to get preeclampsia, because her body had learned that man's sperm and not this man's sperm. And what happens is when she does become pregnant with that partner, the body will actually recognize the genetic type of the fetus, matching it to the genetic type of the sperm, and it makes for a smoother pregnancy because it was according basically to God's designs. Now, I'm writing this into a book. on an airplane with the medical journal next to me typing it in. A woman leans next to me. She says, oh, what are you writing about? I'm like, well, I said, this is an epidemiologic study of contraception and preeclampsia, and I explained. She said, can I read that? And I said, sure, and I gave it to her. She said, this is amazing. She said, my husband and I have, she said, I know we just met, but I feel like I've known you for so long. And she said, my husband and I have been married for 10 years, and we've had 3 kids and used the condom between each of them. She said, every pregnancy I had preeclampsia. How come they never taught this to me in marriage preparation class? It's just the wisdom of the church's teachings. And I think what's ironic of this study of conception is if you look at the journal, the article date when this was published, and this has been in many different journals, but when this one was published, December 8th, the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. So I think it's kind of fun how they plan these things around the church's liturgical calendar. But God has a sense of humor. So the benefits of his original plan. And some people will think, well, okay, well, if I'm not going to use the condom and the patch and the pill, well, what are we going to have? 15 kids? What does the church expect? The church's teachings is not that of, there's a Protestant sect called the quiver-full movement, basing off a verse in the Old Testament about the man who has many children has a quiver full of arrows. And there's a quiver-full movement which says you should do nothing at all to plan your family. You just accept as many kids as you have. And they might have 10, 15, 20. And some people think, well, isn't that what the church is telling us we have to do? Have as many as possible. And the church is not saying that at all. In fact, the church says that a couple has a right, a duty, an obligation to responsibly plan their family, generously and prayerfully. And if there's a just, sufficient, good reason for them to plan out their pregnancy, then they can do that. But do so in a means that's not contraceptive, to use natural family planning, or NFP. Now, in terms of its effectiveness, this is an article from the British Medical Journal. They studied over 19,000 poor women in India with NFP, and had a pregnancy rate approaching 0. And the study goes on and said it's important that the misconception that Catholicism is synonymous with ineffective birth control is laid to rest. And so it's effective. The reason why NFP couples typically have more kids is I think they typically are more generous with God's plan for a family, not because the method is ineffective. NFP is like any other method insofar as there's a user failure rate. If I don't use it appropriately, then obviously it's not going to work as effectively. Now, in terms of NFP, many people don't understand quite what that means. All they know is that, well, doesn't that mean I need to abstain from sex? And when they hear that, they don't want to know any more details. In fact, when I speak to the engaged couples in San Diego, they know nothing about NFP, so I can have a little bit of fun with them. So I tell them now, if you use NFP, that means you're going to need to abstain from sex for about 27 days of the month. And they're like, oh, I'm like, just kidding, haha. So like, it's not funny. But it does involve a time of abstinence. And this kind of rubs against that. Well, it's kind of unnatural, isn't it? A friend of mine, he and his wife could have no children. They had so many fertility problems, 5 or 6 miscarriages, and they went to a fertility doctor. And they said to the doctor, these are the problems we're having. And he said, okay. He said, I need you and your wife to abstain from sex for 30 days so I can assess her fertility condition with precision. And my friend said to the doctor, like, a month? And the doctor said, yes, 30 days. And my friend said, does it have to be 30 days in a row? And say, yes, 30 days in a row. And it was a Catholic hospital, and the nurse in attendance was a Catholic nun. She was a religious sister for about 70 years, or she was 70 years old. And when my friend said, a month, the nun looked over to him and she said, you'll be all right. I realized, okay, well, he's going to be okay. He's not going to have abstinence conniption fits. He's going to make it just fine. And indeed, they abstained and they ended up having a baby. But couples who use NFP, it should be said, that do have, studies show they have intercourse just as frequently as couples who contracept. They just time it differently. And so you can't say that it's going to decrease the amount of intimacy physically. An interesting thing about NFP is couples who try it are happy with it. They can keep using it. Contraceptive textbooks will show you how many people continue to use a form of contraceptive from year to year. Now, here are the numbers. Spermicides, it's 42% will use it next year. Condom, 53, shot, 56, diaphragm, 57, pill and patch, 68, natural family planning is 89%. It is a higher continuation rate of any form of family planning, meaning couples who give it a shot are satisfied. Now, why? Because NFP has benefits that contraception does not offer you. The first benefit, I would say, is you have greater intimacy. One wife wrote to me, and she said after going from contraception to NFP, she said, this is what I had always dreamed marriage would be like. She had mentioned that on the condom, she said, I felt like a toy or recreational vehicle that always had to be sexually available. Another wife said that the chaste married love is the ultimate. And it's not that it takes a dysfunctional marriage and that it makes it perfect, but it blesses the love, I think. Another woman said, I now know the true meaning of the word intimate. Now, when was the last time you heard someone say that about birth control? Well, now that I've taken a shot of Depo-Provera, I finally know the meaning of intimacy. Like, the enthusiasm has never been there because nobody wants to contracept. No one wants to contracept. We might want to have sex without having kids, but we don't want to be at war with our own bodies in order to accomplish that. And that's why NFP is such a beautiful alternative, because it teaches us that the body has already been perfectly made. And you know, they'll say, well, you know, the condom has more intimacy. I saw this at an ad for a condom. It said, our condoms have 0.1 millimeter less latex. There's greater intimacy. And I'm like, that's really not how to build intimacy with a woman, of just buying a thinner condom. But in a certain sense, they're onto something, that the rejection of the body is a rejection of the person. And so the barriers, the message, the language of contraceptive sex, Janet Smith says, it's like saying, I want to make love to you, but let me get my barrier in place. I want to give myself to you, but I'm going to kill any of your sperm that come my way. It's like, are you making love? Are you making war? What's going on here? And so I think there's been interiorly a dissatisfaction with contraception amongst women and men. One man said on NFP, he said it keeps the passion alive. It's like you go from honeymoon to engagement. It keeps you from taking your wife for granted. And so it increases the communication because you have to talk about family planning more often. And I think it makes a man, in a sense, a better lover, because he learns to express love in non-sexual ways because the wife isn't always available. And he learns that not every kiss needs to lead to the bedroom. And I think a woman appreciates this, that he can value her and make her feel cherished in non-sexual ways. And I think what we learn through this, as a man at least what I learned, is that sometimes abstinence is a better expression of love than making love. And I think teenagers need to learn this right now, that abstinence right now isn't waiting for love. You're expressing love for your girlfriend by being chaste and pure. You're doing what's best for her. Likewise, as a husband, to ever think that I can be more loving to my wife through a time of abstinence right now. Maybe mentally she can't handle more kids right now. Financially, it's just not the right time, that abstinence becomes an expression of love. And I think a woman resents a man who can't practice self-control. I think deeply she does. It creates this tension where she's not as receptive to him, because women need space throughout the month. They need time to breathe, especially housewives who have multiple children, because children are so incarnational. They're always crawling all over you like an ant farm. I mean, they're everywhere. I mean, our kids, we've got we have a child who's 7, 5, 4, and a newborn. And the kid's love is so physical. I remember one morning, my daughter was 3 years old at the time, woke me up by crawling into bed and standing upon my face. And I'm in bed, and she's standing on my head. And it's like 6 in the morning, and I'm like, good morning, Mary. And she's like, oh, did I wake you up? Let's have a tea party with dinosaurs. My room, 5 minutes. And when a woman's had kids crawling all over her all day long and a baby breastfeeding every 30 minutes throughout the day, maybe she just needs a little space to breathe. And maybe a guy who understands that through NFP, it kind of builds that time in. And so it deepens the appreciation, keeps you from taking each other for granted. And as a result of that, I think, stronger intimacy, another benefit is they have a lower divorce rate. If you study the studies done on NFP couples and divorce, it's typically under 4% of the divorce rate, typically somewhere between 1 and 4%. And so they have these stronger marriages, because I think it's not just because they're using NFP, but because the virtues you need for NFP are the same virtues that hold the marriage together: the patience, the sacrifice. What will often happen, let's say if a wife wants to use NFP and the husband refuses, it will bring to the surface a lust in him that hasn't been healed. I speak at high schools, and I see this all the time, where a girl's dating a boy, and then she denies him sex, and he can't handle it. I was at one public school, and a girl came in. She told me she's been with this guy, sleeping with him for 4 years. He's possessive, he's abusive, he's lustful, and she just wants to break it off. And I told her, you got to quit sleeping with him and end this thing. And she took off her necklace, and she said, I want you to take this from me. He gave this to me as a sign of that, like he possesses me or whatever, and I just don't want it. And then she left. Half hour later, she comes back into the room, and she's skipping and jumping, and she says, I did it, I dumped him. And I go, oh, good, sweetie, what happened? And she said, I told him I wouldn't sleep with him, and he slammed his locker shut. He threw a book at me, and he said, where's your necklace? She said, I gave it to the chastity guy. And he said, what's he going to do with it? She said, he's going to destroy it. But you see, in the man, and I would say almost an anaphylactic reaction to the demands of chastity. And one of the things that marriage does to us, men and women, one of the purposes of marriage is the sanctification of the spouses. And so in marriage, your faults will rise to the surface like oil and water. And sometimes it's very disturbing because I think, hey, I'm a good guy. I'm very selfless. I'm very loving. And then I get married. I'm like, dude, I'm a selfish jerk. And all of our pride and all of our arrogance comes to the surface because God wants to heal those vices and root them out to make you holier spouses. And so when NFP gets introduced to a marriage and a spouse is resistant, sometimes it'll bring to the surface something that needs to be healed. So it can cause tension, but those who stick with it have the low divorce rate. You also have physical benefits of NFP, a third benefit. One, if a woman charts her cycle, she literally has in her hand her reproductive health chart. She can go to the doctor, he can look at it and help explain what's going on with her. I know it also helps them achieve pregnancy. They know when it's time to have kids, when and how to do that. Contraception doesn't offer that. It also may bring to the surface problems. If you're charting and you notice something wrong, you can talk to your doctor, whereas contraception will bury that problem, especially the pill covers the symptoms instead of dealing with the problem. One wife told me, she said, switching to NFP saved our life. She said, for one, we started charting my cycle, and I started to notice something weird going on in the chart, and I took it to the doctor, and he said that's probably a thyroid problem. We went to the thyroid specialist. Turns out I had a cancerous thyroid tumor, and now it was on the verge of killing me. They operated immediately and saved my life. And so NFP saved her life. I know another wife, they switched to NFP, they conceived, and then they discovered that she had a tumor during the pregnancy and was able to save her life. If she had never conceived, they never would have known about it otherwise. And so God is able to work through our generosity to him to give us these physical benefits. And as a husband, from even a secular perspective, if I know NFP is good for my wife's body, well then okay. Then where do we sign up for the class? Is it good for him? Okay. Is it good for her? Okay, let's do that. I don't need complex theological arguments. Look, is it good for my wife? Okay, let's do it. I mean, it should be simple. Because as men, we want to look like a knight, but we don't want to bleed like one. And I think NFP kind of gives us that opportunity to die to ourselves. It's best for our spouses, best for the kid, and to raise us up a little bit as a leader in the family. A friend of mine was talking to a priest, and he's a young dad, and the priest said to him, how's your marriage going, your family? And he said, well, what are you doing as the spiritual leader of your family? And, the guy said, and he said a little joke or whatever. The priest stuck his finger in the man's face and said, this is not funny. What are you doing? Are you blessing your children with holy water at night? Are you not just praying? Are you leading the prayers? Are you blessing your wife? Are you praying over her womb? Are you doing? And this man was so convicted by this priest's seriousness that this is not funny. You're the head of that family, and you better be present spiritually. And so NFP, I think, is one of these ways that a man can kind of step up and say, hey, honey, let's plan our family together. Let's not just put you on the pill and let you deal with it. Let's chart this together. Let's study. Let's learn. And it builds intimacy because you grow an appreciation for each other. A fourth benefit you get from NFP, you get authority with your kids when it comes to talking about chastity. Because I think Catholic parents are so out of touch if they think that they can expect their children to obey the Catholic Church's teaching on sex outside of marriage if they're not willing to obey the Catholic Church inside of marriage. What message does that send? Oh, well, you need to abstain from sex for 10 years, but I'm not going to wait for 1 week. You need to take up that cross, if necessary, of chastity. And I think chastity is a virtue. It's more easily caught than it is taught. Kids won't always obey you, but they'll imitate you. And so if the parents are chaste, I find they have authority with their kids because you're not living kind of a double life. I think there's an integrity, which is the fifth benefit. You have a peace of conscience. When you go to church and you say, I believe in the Holy Catholic Church, the Holy Spirit, the Lord, the giver of life, you don't just say it with your words on Sunday, you live it on Saturday night as well. It creates a harmony, I think, between your sexuality and your spirituality, your religion and your reality. These two realities of your life connect, I think, when we obey the Church's teachings on chastity. And intellectually, you got to think, look, if the church is wrong on contraception, what else is she wrong on? Well, obviously, this has been infallible. John Paul II said it was infallible. So if she's wrong on this infallible teaching, how do I know she's right on in vitro fertilization? Well, how do I know the church is right on the books of the Bible? How do we know she's right on the resurrection? It corrodes the faith because you have no surety. If you doubt this part, why not to doubt the rest? And so with NFP, it also gives you that peace of conscience. But all these reasons that I've thrown out there, the physical benefits, the side effects, none of this really gets to the core of the morality of contraception versus natural family planning. Contraception is not wrong because it might have dangerous side effects. There are blood pressure medications you could take that might have dangerous side effects, but that doesn't make it immoral to take. The reason why contraception is wrong is because it is a deliberate sterilization of the sexual act. It violates the purpose of sex, which is babies and bonding, and violates the meaning of sex, which is the marriage vows made flesh. If the purpose of sex is babies and bonding, it's saying, I want the bonding, but I don't want the babies. And that is just as wrong as if a husband were to say to his wife, I want the babies, but I don't want the bonding. So I want to have sex with you, conceive a child, but I want no emotional entanglement from this affair. That guy's messed up. You need the babies, you need the bonding together. So it violates the purpose. Then it also violates the meaning of sexuality, that your vows are to be open to life and to give yourselves to one another totally, but then contraception contradicts all of that. And so some people will say, well, can't you just, generally stay open to life? You're going to have kids, but you're going to contracept in between, but generally you're open to having a family. You can't do that with the marriage vows. That's like saying, I'm generally going to be faithful to my wife. I mean, here and there, maybe another woman, but generally I'm open to my wife. No, it's all or nothing. And some people will say, well, you're just splitting hairs. I mean, NFP, contraception, aren't you basically doing the same thing? And you could say to them, well, look, if contraception and NFP are the same, just use NFP. And they'll be like, whoa, well, that's totally different. Well, if there's a big difference in the method of NFP, it's an indication there's probably a big difference in the morality of it as well. And a good analogy we can use with married couples to help them understand the distinction is that just because you have a good goal in end, it's not time to have kids right now, doesn't mean your means is right. So let's say you have two women that want to stay skinny. So one diets and practices temperance and doesn't eat fatty foods and stays slim. The other one practices bulimia. She binges on food and then she purges out the effect. This is like contraception and NFP. The contraceptive person binges on the pleasure of sex, purges out the life-giving effect, and remains not pregnant. The NFP person refrains from the gift of sexuality, practices temperance, and achieves the same goal. And so just because our goal is good doesn't mean that the means is there as well. And to be intellectually precise with these people, if they think that contraception is the same as NFP, well, look, if contraception is wrong and NFP is contraception, at what point does an NFP couple contracept? Where are they acting immorally? Are they being immoral by having sex during a infertile time? No, you can do that. Are they being immoral by abstaining from sex? No, you can abstain. St. Paul says you can abstain for the sake of prayer. So you can't really justify at what point they sin. And so ultimately, some Protestants have even noticed this. Some Protestants are starting to catch on to NFP. I read one husband, he was a Catholic husband, he said, there's no need to artificially thwart or block fertility during a natural fertile time. God has already taken care of this already, building into the woman seasons, not only for fertility and bringing children forth, but for unfertility. And all we need to do is just wait a couple days, and if we can't do that, something is wrong. And so out of the woodwork, different people are starting to recognize there's wisdom to this teaching. And ultimately, I think it's very important that when we talk about NFP, we explain to couples it's not contraception or NFP. The good Catholics use NFP, bad Catholics use contraception. No, it's not contraception versus NFP. It's contraception versus chastity. Because we can fall into this mentality, oh, you're getting married, you're using NFP, right? The default shouldn't be not having kids. The default position should be opening our life to children, unless there's a sufficient reason not to have them right away. Because I think we've all fallen into this contraceptive mentality as a culture. And in certain cultures, especially in Western Europe, they're disappearing because they're contracepting themselves away. We went to World Youth Day. My wife and I brought our baby boy, who's 11 months old, over to Spain with us because she's still breastfeeding. And we were on the airplane, and the Spanish people seeing a baby, because their fertility rates are so low there because of birth control. This child was like a celebrity on the airplane. I mean, we're sitting there, the stewardess is coming up to us, oh, Bambino, and they're touching his face, and I'm like, you're a stranger. But there was a married couple next to us, and they just kept looking at the baby. Like, I thought I was like holding a tiger cub in my hand or something. They were so captive. What is that? But we've fallen away from this Catholic understanding of the family, that children, according to the Catholic Church, are the, quote, supreme gift of marriage. Okay, if there is a supreme gift of marriage, how long do you want to wait before receiving it? You better have a good reason not to. And the church never says you must have this many kids or that many. She trusts that you'll be generous and prayerful. But if you look at what's imposed on us as married couples, if any of you in here have more than 2 or 3 kids, you know what it's like to go out in public. When people are those all yours? You know what causes that, right? Are you guys done? And we've heard this constantly. I mean, even from the second child we had, are you guys done yet? Are you done? I remember when we found out we're expecting a baby girl. I told a guy I know, and he goes, oh, well, you've got your girl now, and the boy, so you're done, right? I'm like, yes, I've collected the entire set. I can stop collecting children now. I have a boy and a girl. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, who are we having kids for? And I think NFP kind of teaches us that, life is really sacred. And the idea that I could have contracepted away my children, artificially blocked them with some chemicals or drugs, or aborted them through like the pill, I mean, the thought of that, I think, just makes me shudder. In fact, I know of a married mother, and she has 2 kids, and she was in her mid-40s and in menopause, and she started getting really upset at a family dinner. And the husband was like, well, what's wrong, honey? And I'll tell you later. And what it was is she was sitting there at dinner with her husband and 2 kids, and she said, somebody's missing. And I know why he's not here. I know why our child, we contracepted him away. And all we had was just 2 kids. We had our kids, and that's it. And not understanding the blessings that they are. And some say, well, hey, kids are expensive. I mean, it costs $8.9 million to raise a kid each day. They can be a little bit pricey, but they're so rich in what they give you. They save you from yourself. What a gift of sanctification God gives us, to humble us, to make us serve. I mean, the lesson that they teach us of service. My 5-year-old son called me to the bathroom the other day, or he was 4 at the time. He called me, he said, Dad, come here, I need something. So I come in, he's on the toilet, and he said, Dad, I need you to do 4 things for me. I'm like, okay. And he said, I need you to get me a dinosaur book. I need you to turn the fan on, the light on, then shut the door on the way out, and I will call you when I am finished. Yes, my lord. Yes, my liege. But I mean, you could pay somebody to do that, but they call you to serve. But then what they give you in return is the most genuine love you could imagine. My little girl was walking through the store, and she saw flowers there. And she saw them, and she's like, Mom, she's like, I have to get them for Dad. I have to buy them for Daddy. I love him so much. And the mom was, okay, so she gets him these little, $5 flowers, and she comes home, and she surprises me with the flowers, and I kept those things in a vase in my room for months and months. They had mold growing on them, and my was, you got to throw them away, And so I plucked one off and cleaned it off, and I saved it, and I pinned it to a little picture of her and I said, what, I'm going to save that. I'm going to wear that on my corsage the day that she enters the cloister as a religious sister one day. I'm going to wear that right there, And I'm not going to be a control freak. She can go to whatever convent she wants, but as long as they wear the full habit. I have explicitly said, and I will say this on the record, she does not have to become a nun. As long as she finds a man who loves her more than Jesus Christ, she's more than welcome to marry him instead. So fair enough, okay? So, but the blessings that they bring to us. We have to keep it all in perspective. And ultimately, I think we need to emphasize with the couples, not just the blessings of the kids and stuff, but something that I never heard as an NFP, going through an engaged encounter weekends, is that NFP, I mean, let's be honest, it's a pain in the neck. NFP stinks. I don't like it. My wife doesn't like it. It's not fun. It's hard. It's an enormous sacrifice. It's a pain in the neck. And I think couples need to hear this going into marriage, that this is not going to be easy. It's going to be demanding. But John Paul II said that the perfection of love comes only through the cross. You have to take up that cross. And, and it's difficult, but at some point, you have to admit, okay, contraception would be easier. Contraception would be more convenient. But at some point, I have to decide what matters more, is my Catholic faith or my convenience. Because frankly, you can't have both sometimes. And this is one of those instances. Sometimes you got the football game, same time as the rugby match. Okay, well, record it. You don't always get what you want. And it's hard. And you think, well, why does it need to be so hard? Well, some of Jesus' sayings were very hard if you read the Gospels. And they say this saying is hard to accept. They say that on divorce and remarriage. Look at the apostles. They were normal guys. They were pretty not well-formed men. When Jesus said you can't divorce and remarry, they said, well, then it's better, I guess, not even to get married if we can't get divorced. That was their response to him. And they said, it's a hard saying. Some of these things are hard. And you think, well, why does he need to make it so hard, to plan out our family? And I think one reason is because Jesus wants you to have kids. Jesus loves children. And I think there's a book in America now, it came out, it's an evangelical Christian book called Heaven is for Real. And it's about a little boy who dies during an operation and just experiences a few moments in heaven. And he was biologically dead, and he experienced a few moments of heaven, and he came back. And he was a Protestant boy, but he even admitted, oh yeah, Mary's up there and she's standing next to Jesus. And sometimes she stands next to him and praises, sometimes she prays to him. And this is a Protestant theology, this is Catholic theology coming out of a little Protestant 5-year-old kid. But in this, after this experience, one of the things he told his dad about his experience with heaven and Jesus is he said, Dad, Jesus really loves children. And the dad's like, oh, I know. And he's like, no, Dad, no, Jesus really loves the children. And he goes, oh, I know. No, Dad. But it draws you back, I think, to the sacred humanity of Christ. And every child you bring into the world, you're not bringing one child into the world, you are bringing generations into the world that one day, God willing, will populate the beatific vision of heaven. And if we can keep that perspective, then it can put sometimes the crosses and the trials of marriage a bit in perspective. So my Mother Teresa said natural family planning is really just self-control out of love for each other. John Paul II said the church and the world today, more than ever, need married couples who generously let themselves be schooled by Christ. And ultimately, I think what I've learned the most by NFP is that my wife's body's perfect. Like, she doesn't need shots, she doesn't need drugs and chemicals, she just needs to be understood. Instead of repressing her body with chemicals to conform to my desires, I conform my desires to the beautiful way that God created her body. And if we can do this, I think as one saint said, we'll begin to see the peace and the joy that come from chastity is worth more than all of the pleasures of the world. So God bless you. Thank you very much.